We're here today with Judge Strand and Judge Halsey of the United States Federal State of Minnesota to talk about community outreach. So before we get started, could you please briefly tell us your professional backgrounds?
All right, my name is Steve Halsey. I am a judge in the 10th Judicial District here in Minnesota. I graduated from law school in 1978. Started in private practice with a couple of different law firms, then was in a partnership with two other attorneys for about 17 years. I was appointed by I keep saying that, Governor Jesse Ventura in 2002. And I've been a judge for 18 years. In Minnesota, we have mandatory retirement at age 70, and I will be 70 in December of 2021, so I will have to retire. Beth.
I am Elizabeth Strand. I am currently a district court judge in the 10th Judicial District in the state of Minnesota as well. I work alongside my colleague, Judge Halsey. I practice in private practice dealing with family law, criminal law, and immigration law, and then worked as a part-time public defender, and then switched hats and worked as a prosecuting attorney for some towns in Wright County, Minnesota, before I applied to become a judge in Minnesota. I was appointed in 2012 by Governor Mark Dayton. I've been working then on the bench for the last 8 years. Thoroughly enjoy my job.
Very impressive. Thank you so much. And also congratulations to Judge Halsey on your upcoming retirement. So we had heard about you initially because of your public access show, the District Court Show. Could you please describe the District Court Show?
All right, well, I'll go into that. The background for the show is that several years ago, it's probably now about 40 years ago, in around 1980, cable television was in its infancy. And I was a young man on the Anoka City Council, which is a small suburb northwest of Minneapolis. And the various cable providers around the country were going to different cities and trying to get the contract to have the franchise there. So I was in the beginning of cable TV starting out. So when cable TV started, we started doing weekly broadcasts on the television station, public access, to talk about what was happening in the city. So then go ahead about 20 years, and I was appointed to the bench. And at the end of my second year, I talked to the cable TV administrator, who I knew very well, and said, you know, I think I'd like to do a public access show about the courts, because a judge, Kevin Burke, who just recently retired in Hennepin County, which is the largest county in the state, he had been doing a show called Meet Your Court for many years, and it was very successful, and a lot of people watched it. So in January of 2004, so that's almost 17 years ago, we started doing the program, 30 minutes, and basically my approach was to have it be kind of a basics about the law and court procedure, nuts and bolts, not big picture about, justice or the Constitution or anything like that. We concentrated on basics like, what's jury service going to be like for you? Truancy, child custody, domestic violence, lawyer discipline, sentencing, things like that. So very nuts and bolts program. And so we've done now 128 episodes of that program, and Beth joined me just a few years ago, and I think it's been very successful having the two of us on the program.
Right, I certainly haven't been along for that entire ride. I joined just a few years ago, and I echo what Judge Halsey just said. It's an enjoyable program to do. It's enjoyable to know that we are reaching out to the community and giving them some education. And in addition to that, I think transparency to the courts is extremely important. So it's been a real pleasure to do the show alongside Judge Halsey every month for the last few years.
So you mentioned that you really wanted to get into the nuts and bolts of how the courts worked. how the courts work. Have you received a lot of feedback from the audience about the show's role? Like, has it gotten them more involved? Do you think that through the show they've started to understand the court procedures better?
Well, I've usually at the very end of the program, I will say, if you have any comments or questions about the show, send me an email, and the email address is running on the credits. I have heard from very few people by email over the years, and usually those have been critical, didn't like what they heard. But I've also heard, anecdotally from people just kind of randomly that, well, we watched the program, or I saw it. One gentleman said, I was visiting relatives in Minneapolis, and I was at a hotel in Roseville, which is a suburb, and there's a program with you. Usually I've just heard, like I said, anecdotally that people have enjoyed the program. So I think it's a proper length. It's 30 minutes. Uh, the guests sometimes are kind of nervous, but the time goes by very fast. And I would say the very vast majority of guests we've had have enjoyed the process.
I will add, we did go beyond the scope of the show, what I recall recently, or I shouldn't say recently, a couple of years ago, when a member of the public did reach out to Judge Halsey. He wanted to talk about distracted driving, where his daughter was unfortunately a victim in a distracted driving accident, and he wanted to get that story out to the public, to remind everybody that keep your eyes on the road message. It was a really moving show. It was incredibly sad to talk to him, but it was so nice to have that opportunity and the forum to educate the public about that really important issue. So every once in a while, we do go beyond that and accommodate some requests to have a message shouted out to the community.
Sure. I mean, it's definitely an important issue, and with 128 episodes, I'm sure you've covered a lot of content. Are there any other additional initiatives that have been undertaken in Minnesota courts related to improving access to justice?
Well, there's been, I think probably the most important one is the self-help centers that have started around Minnesota, and this goes back probably maybe 5 years or a little bit more. And because of the economy and basically because of demographics, there have been more and more people that have appeared in court without an attorney. I guess the Latin phrase is pro se. We'd rather call them unrepresented litigants. And so now there are a lot of forms and videos on the state court website that are designed to be understandable by the public to use without a lawyer. The Self-Help Center is in our district. The staff of that goes to the different courthouses. There's 8 counties in our district, and at least one day a week, if not more, they are there available to either take appointments or just people that walk in. And they don't give them legal advice, but they help them with the paperwork, which oftentimes can be very confusing to folks, particularly folks that English is their second language. So I think that's one of the best things that have happened in the last few years to improve access to justice.
And I agree, those self-help centers have played a significant role in leveling the playing field for folks who have attorneys and those who cannot afford to have an attorney. There's also an initiative or push to change the language in complex legal forms and make it more plain so more individuals can understand what they're reading. Legal terms can be quite complex. Legal processes can be quite complex. So that initiative to simplify things so that more people can understand what they're reading, more people can understand the process has been very helpful to them as well as to the courts, because when people come before us, we really want to make sure that it is a level playing field. With the self-help centers that have popped up, they are highly used. And it's a really good resource for judges to indicate to an individual that there is a location just down the hallway at which they can sit down, meet with an individual, identify their issue, and perhaps get a copy of a form or some instructions about what steps they could take. I agree, with what Judge Halsey said. They do not give legal advice there, but they do act as a conduit for individuals, so they have an opportunity to solve their really important issues.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I didn't realize that there were so many people who were representing themselves, but it sounds like a great initiative. How does the judiciary seek to improve its outreach to communities such as ethnic minorities, socioeconomically disadvantaged litigants, women, and the elderly? Has this facilitated their access to the courts?
Well, first of all, there are what's called equal justice committees in each county and district, as well as a statewide committee. And they they set up programs, and they have listening sessions. So for example, our Equal Justice Committee will go to one of the cities that has a more diverse population, and perhaps they will meet at a church, and basically it is a listening session. They sit there and they listen to people's questions, perhaps their complaints and criticisms, and talk to them about how the courts can perhaps help that situation. One that I was involved with, it's probably been 5 or 6 years now, is that we have a very large Somali community in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and I think Minnesota has the most Somali immigrants of any state in the U.S. And we set aside an entire morning to meet with that community. We had breakout sessions and listening sessions, and that was very successful. So those are some of the things that we are doing. Also, the judges have there's a young woman on the state court staff that sets up these seminars. WebEx is now called Cultural Perspectives, so that judges can be more aware of the challenges for people in perhaps lesser served communities that maybe have some need to have more information on how the court systems work.
Circling back a little bit to those self-help centers, there is now a self-help center in a technical college or community college in our area. And the purpose of that particular self-help center is to reach perhaps young women who are trying to get some education, to make access to justice a little easier for them between classes. And a lot of people at the community college have questions about perhaps child support and collecting that, or evictions and payment of debt. So that's been one way to reach out to a different group of individuals. Once in a while, pre-COVID, we had warrant forgiveness days as well. What warrant forgiveness days accomplished was for those folks who had difficulty coming to court, missed a court date on a low-level criminal offense, we would open up our courthouse and have people walk in and ask for forgiveness of the warrant and a chance to resolve that outstanding case. Because when we work in an area that doesn't have public transportation, we understand the difficulties that people have sometimes in getting to the courthouse. With Zoom now, that's changed a little bit, and we're getting a little bit better of population coming to court via remote technology. But in Little Buffalo, we have, I think, one taxi service, no public transit, no buses. So that's one way to reach out to folks. We do have remote interpreters for court hearings, so anyone who has English as a second language is able to have a translator there to assist them through court hearings. One thing that I think Minnesota has really done a great job at is they are making an active attempt to appoint a diverse bench. There's an active effort to look for female candidates for the bench, as well as people who look more like the communities that they serve. We are also undertaking an effort to hire a more diverse staff for court administration so that everybody feels comfortable when they come to our courthouse.
I'll just add to that, when I became an attorney back 40 years ago, in our district, I believe we had one, perhaps two female judges out of, there were probably about 35 judges then. We now have 45 judges in our district, 25 of which are women. So a majority of the judges in our district are women. And that's been going on statewide for probably the last, pushing 10 years.
with the ongoing corona pandemic, what changes have you made to your outreach projects because of that?
Go ahead, Beth.
More Zoom, more Zoom, more Zoom. We're doing a lot by Zoom. In fact, next week I am going to speak to a group of female attorneys by Zoom, just talking to them about accessing court better and what tips and tricks can be done. I think if we take an active effort and schedule more Zoom committee meetings, and we are continuing to meet, all of our committees, our Equal Justice Committee, for example, is continuing to meet, and I've had the honor of to sit in on some of those meetings and listen to the great initiatives. They're ongoing. We're just shifted from in-person meetings to Zoom meetings, and we're not forgetting to keep our eye on that ball. Court, as I mentioned earlier, has been done by Zoom as well. We rely heavily on email. We email out notices now to folks who need to come to court with a Zoom link. So in addition to a reminder for their next court date, they get a direct link that they can type in and appear in court much easier. So we have shifted and been very nimble to ensure that access to justice remains. We also have shifted the self-help center meetings to Zoom appointments so people can continue to have access to those folks who work hard in those locations.
Do you have any suggestions for others who are struggling to maintain public outreach in these times of social distancing? Just yet again, would you recommend using online platforms, or do you have any other suggestions?
Well, I think there's a lot of, in this day with social media and everything else, there's lots of opportunities, in 20th century technology, just good old paper. Some judges in our state, perhaps not too many, but myself, I've written or submitted over 250 articles to newspapers in the last 18 years. And it's, again, nuts and bolts stuff, just, maybe 1.5 pages double spaced. Newspapers around here, they just they eat up that stuff. They want to have content that the public will be interested in. You can do blogging, you can do podcasts as your staff does. And I think is as Judge Strand mentioned she's doing, is to volunteer to appear on programs. A lot of places around the country and the world have public access channels that they're looking for content as well. So you can volunteer and talk about what's going on in the courts, what changes are going on because of COVID. And so there's a lot of opportunities out there, to reach out to the public.
Melissa, I'd just like to add to, the state has an Instagram site, so some information has been posted on there. The state court website is constantly updating. I know people don't always have access to computers, so there's that barrier. But our courts are too looking at sending text message reminders to folks about court dates, about jury service. So we are looking at ways to continue to be able to reach out to people. So if you hit the local newspapers, Instagram, have email sent out, texting sent out, we're hopeful to hit more individuals. It does not hit everyone, especially if they don't own a computer or a smartphone. But we continue to look at ways that we can continue to do those reach outs.
Well, I think definitely, using such different platforms, I mean, the demographic of people reading newspapers versus people checking Instagram is very different. So I think you've already probably got, very diverse groups. I just wanted to ask, what kind of things do you usually submit to newspapers?
Oh, all the same kind of topics as our program has had, but maybe some more kind of things that I have grievances about, like people not stopping for pedestrians in the crosswalk, or speeding. What's going to happen if you get a speeding ticket, or what are the costs if you get caught drunk driving? Things like that. Perhaps more on a humorous note, but and I've written about when things are topical, like about bail, or about what does a grand jury do, things like that. Because if there's something in the news that's kind of sensational, People might be protesting at the courthouse. Why did that guy get out of jail pending his trial? U.S., you have the constitutional right to bail. So that's why kind of do it as more of an educational thing, with maybe a little bit of humor, spiced in there.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I know a lot of people don't understand court processes, so it sounds like a great way to get them, to understand the basics, certainly.
If folks want information about what's going on in Minnesota, you can just Google Minnesota courts and you will get to the state court website, and there are lots of resources there. There's the National Center for State Courts in the U.S. that has lots and lots of resources. So there's no shortage of resources to find out what judges are doing and how we can improve public trust and confidence.
Transparency is key, and we continue to strive to be transparent so that people do maintain confidence in the judiciary. So we work really hard at that. We also, as a state, work really hard at being empathetic to our customers, the people that appear in front of us. It's not always, we can be really busy, but we really strive hard to take the time to understand the position of each side that comes before us, and to remember that everybody's a human being. That's the lens through which I think Minnesota judges look at all of our cases. We want to maintain that because it's such a crucial job. We'd never take it for granted. We look for new ways to reach out. So if anybody has ideas on how we can continue to encourage reach out efforts, please reach out to us as well.
Thank you so much. I definitely look forward to hearing from participants if they have any suggestions themselves. And thank you so much for speaking with me this morning.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity, Melissa.
And for everyone listening, stay tuned for more episodes in the Global Judicial Integrity Network podcast series. Thank you.